And we are live. Welcome, everybody. Just as we get a chance for people to kind of start moving in and joining us on this special live broadcast as part of the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest, a live stream that we get to do talking all things weathering, really, between Ralph and myself. And of course, I want to officially welcome my illustrious guest, which I've got to make sure that I'm pointing in the right way, Ralph Renzetti, the Mud Father. And we have a number of pictures that we're going to go through that people have submitted for today's feature, which is how would you weather this, which we are going to be getting to shortly. But we also get just a chance to talk about different things and different techniques and getting into it. Just as a reminder, for the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest, it is happening now. And if you're interested in joining it, or you're thinking about joining it, you can stick around and listen to today's live stream about weathering. And if you decide, you know what, I think I'd like to try this out, you can email me at jcsriptrack@gmail.com. So sorry, that's jcsriptrack@gmail.com. As a matter of fact, I'll just put it in the comments section there. And if you can email me there, and I can send you a copy of the rules. And then we go from there. So far,
isn't technology wonderful?
Oh, I love it.
I click on a button and it comes up on the screen.
Yeah, so that is great, because you just email there and we go from there. Also, a special shout out and thank you to both Model Railroading Live for being able to host this on StreamYard, to Andy Crawford, who is sitting behind the scenes, making all this possible and bringing up different pictures, and of course to our sponsor. We have for the main prizes, we have Midwest Model Railroad, who will be offering the main prizes for this weathering contest, which is a $50 gift certificate for each of the 5 categories that one can enter as far as this contest is concerned. And there are 3 categories.
Well, you can enter in 3.
You can enter in 3. You can enter in 3 contests, or 3 categories, but there are 5 total prizes. And so it's best weathered rolling stock, best weathered locomotive, best weathered structure, and then there is a People's Choice Award, and there is a best of show. And whoever wins the best of show will be awarded to one of the winners of the 3 categories, which means the person who wins the top spot goes home with $150 US in gift cards from Midwest Model Railroad. But in addition to that, the original contest creators, Ron's Trains and Things, is also offering a T-shirt. And Eric Hall of IMRRO, who is a current judge and one of the sponsors of and is also he's a current judge and was one of the original sponsors of the original Down and Dirty Weathering Contest 1 and 2. He is also part of this, and his wild hair productions, there's going to be a grab bag of material from that. Those are the prizes that we have so far. We have about 30 people who have indicated their interest in entering. We've received some of their "I'm getting started" pictures. One person has even sent me getting ready to put their video together. So it is coming together. So this is a chance to do all sorts of Q&A. The question and answers today, we're going to be talking a lot about weathering, but if you have any questions about the contest itself, please put them into chat. And that's regardless of whether you're joining us from Model Railroading Live or from JC's Riptrack, the channel. It's being broadcast to both. So if you chat in either, we can see them both and we can bring those questions up. I guess, Ralph, what is on your weathering bench today?
On my weathering bench today,
What do you-
it's non railroad related,
Okay.
but it's still weathering. It doesn't matter how you look at it. Weathering is weathering.
Yes.
Uh, I'm doing a diorama right now
Okay.
of a naval mine,
Nice.
and on top of the naval mine, I will have this figure sitting on top of it.
Mhm.
The figure is
Mhm.
quite interesting.
Yes.
So that's what's on my workbench today.
Mhm.
I also have and still working on over 30 N scale projects for a customer from MRL
Wow.
in Baltimore,
Okay.
um, which has kept me quite busy.
Yeah. Now there is one question that's come through. I'll get to my weathering desk in just a second. John Arthur just brought up a question here. I'm just going to put it there, and it just with the video length, John. One of the things that I've learned is if it goes over 20 minutes, you're going to be losing points in terms of presentation. Try to yes, some of my videos have gone up to the 40-minute length, but I've actually found that the stuff that tends to be watched most generally is from 15 to 20 minutes, and most people just will watch it for about 10. Uh, and I realize when you have 5 hours worth of weathering or however long it takes to do, and shoving that into just a 10-minute to 20-minute video can be quite difficult. But try to keep it under 20 minutes. That's the main thing, because if over 20 minutes, and if the judges kind of say, okay, I need to get to the next thing, just keep that in mind that we have our 5 judges that need to watch it all, and so do keep that in mind. So yeah, there's a suggestion there. So anyway, sitting on my weathering desk, it's a rare. Usually, I do one thing at a time, like do that and do some, and then move on to the next one, sort of as incentive to move on. But right now, I actually have 4 different things sitting on my weathering desk.
Wow,
And,
that's unusual for you.
yeah, and well, two of them are a couple of N scale locomotives. That one is a switcher for a steel mill, a companion to one that I did earlier that featured the weathering pencils, but I'm using different techniques for it. And from the same person, I'm also doing a Louisville and Nashville, the Alco C420.
Ooh.
That I think I showed you a picture of this, Ralph, where at first blush it doesn't look all that weathered, just a little bit of chipping along the side. Then you take a much closer look and realize this thing is really worn out, but it hides it well because of the color. That one was really interesting, and Ralph helped me on this. Is that it's an Atlas locomotive. It came from the company in an olive green when it's supposed to be gray. And we used, and this is to John Peters, one of our other judges, and to Ralph, of trying to figure out how to turn this green locomotive that's not supposed to be green to gray. And so and with that, so it was a case of using a thin clear coat with a little bit of both white and a red-violet color. Happened to use Games Workshop colors. In this case, White Scar was the white, and Pink Horror was the name of the red-violet, and that brought the whole locomotive to gray. And so that I just posted those two.
Those colors are all based on color wheel.
Yes, and the contrast colors, because when you and the idea is to do what's called desaturation, where you're pushing one color towards the middle of the wheel, and Ralph has his color wheel up.
Like here, my finger is on the red. So if you have a green locomotive up here, and you want to tone it down from a bright green, like a Burlington, the new Burlington stuff. When you do your fade, you put a drop of red in it.
Yeah, and
And
that,
if you have a Canadian Pacific locomotive and you want to tone it down, you add a drop of green into your fade. It's the opposing color to what the official color is, and it's color wheel's based on 3 colors. The 3 colors are red, yellow, and blue, and everything in between. So
Azak, you had a question with regard to any train cars we have to stay away from when we are choosing a car. I'm assuming that you meant R instead of 8.
That's totally up to you.
Yep.
If you were asking me to choose a car, I would go by color, because black, oxide red, and I guess and red are the 3 colors that are the hardest to weather when it comes down to doing your weathering. Black, you turn to gray. Red, you have to tone it down by adding the green to it. Boxcar red, it's an oxide red or a primer red, basically the same color. You have to tone it down, and it's difficult to get the colors correct. So if you want to pick one that's yellow or one that's blue, you'll have better luck. Or even the light gray, like these grain cars are.
Yeah.
You'll have better luck.
It's not to say that those colors, you can't weather those colors, but Ralph is certainly right of saying that you'll have an easier time. So
that was my point.
But in terms of type of rail car, honestly, anything. In fact, I think one person asked me about the steel car.
The well cars. The well cars.
Yeah.
See, I don't see a well car as a good representation of your weathering, because you're looking at, in HO, you're looking at a ½ inch of weathering.
Mm-hmm.
In N scale, you're looking at 1/4 inch of weathering, as opposed to a full side of a box car or a full side of a grain car.
Sorry, Ralph. What I meant was, you know, the types of train cars you see in a steel mill.
Oh yeah, okay.
The slag cars and that.
Slag cars.
And
sorry.
That kind of thing. I wasn't entirely sure the terminology.
I don't think I've ever seen what one of those cars started out as, what color it started out as. I've only seen it as rusted all to hell. Yes.
Well, I'm certainly not surprised. So anyway, what I mentioned on the other thing that I have on my hobby desk is I just started the Ammo by Meg's solution box for rust weathering. I just started the N-scale boxcar, and in addition to that, I'm also doing a non-model railroad one where I have a 3D printed bust of a pirate and a rat that I've just started to work on. I got the skin tones and everything down, but nothing.
For those that don't know, explain the weathering box.
Okay, I did basically a box opening on that with one of my most recent videos, and the company Ammo by Meg has created what's called a solution box, which is instead of just a couple of types of one type of paint, it is a complete weathering solution from start to finish, or at least where it comes with everything that you need in order to create something akin to what's on the cover of the box. And they have several of these. You know, how to do an M4A1 Sherman tank, for example, bare metal aircraft. They come with everything except the model and the airbrush that you need. But just recently, they did a realistic rust one that, while what they feature on it is an Iraqi tank that is just rusted all to hell. that the techniques and the tools that it provides, like it has a primer, it has several acrylic paints in it. It has 2 oil brushers, 1 streaking brusher. It has
which are mineral based.
yes, which are mineral based. It also comes with the thinner that you need for those oil based paints. It comes with 2 enamel wash, at least 2 enamel washes, and chipping, the heavy chipping fluid. So as you can see, it's a variety of products. Plus, the one thing that I always fail to mention is whether it also comes with 2 bottles of weathering pigments. So it comes with a lot of product, but the most valuable thing in that, in addition to everything else, it also gives you a 64-page book on how to use it. And it's multilingual, so it's English, French, Italian, and Spanish, I think.
If Spanish was not there, I would be really, because that's where all this originates from, in Spain.
Yeah. Well, the Spaniards are some of the best modelers out there. So if we're trying to weather an old era train car from the 50s to 70s, any ideas where to find reference photos for those? Any suggestions, Ralph? I've done one once or twice, but it's
I have my reference that I go to. I use railpictures.net, railcarphotos.com, locophotos.com, and railpicturearchive.net. Those are the ones that I used mostly, and it's hit and miss whether you find something from the 50s and 60s and 70s.
Quite often those ones are in black and white, but there can be, even looking at modern cars, you can actually kind of get a pattern and look for patterns and things like that. Moderns, like there are, of course, a lot of color photographs of steam locomotives, for example, that you can find, but most of them are in black and white. So you're kind of guessing on what those colors might be. Like I've only ever done 1 steam locomotive and with one of the videos, and that was part of the challenge. Was the only pictures that I had of that locomotive were all in black and white, and so what I had to do was look at some color photographs of in-use steam locomotives that were newer, just to look at what the patterns were, to kind of come up with an idea of what to do and compare.
Colors. Gives you the colors.
Yeah, and so you get the colors from that, and then apply it. So part of it is just extrapolation. So there's to a certain degree what we do we can replicate, but there's also to draw inspiration from. And so some of the other things that you could be doing would be like if it's say for example like Heritage Park in Calgary in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, for example, has a number of these full-size ones. I've actually gone there and shot video, but of course they tend to keep those in better condition than they might have operated in. However, if you catch it early in the spring when they haven't really done maintenance, or late in the fall, you can see where some of that weathering pattern is starting. You just kind of extrapolate right there.
So John Arthur says he sent an email to Andy. What did he send to Andy?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a picture there? No audio.
No audio on you, Andy.
Right, I think there's a dedicated button that would give me that audio, but just as I said, I'm working on getting his image up. It's embedded in his email. So one moment, I'll have that downloaded and up for you guys to take a look at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are there any other photos that you may have? Let's bring up that prototype of yours that we can talk about.
Sure, you want to start with that one? Okay.
Sure, let's do that.
All right.
Okay, you first, John.
Okay. So one of the things that I think, Ralph, you just looking at the top of that rust pattern right across right across the top is the first thing that kind of comes out for me, and this one we're sort of cheating on because we have seen this one before.
Yeah.
That if you look down on the top from this one, is that the rust actually is just on the side. It doesn't actually start from the top and then flow over the edge, which indicates that the rust is actually originating from what is probably a weld seam along there. Now, looking at that, the other thing that I notice is that the logo itself is worn away a little bit. So probably one of the early things that I would do fairly early on, either just before or just after I do the initial fading, I would even say just before, is I would try and match the color of the base of the model. Like, so say, for example, I'm not sure what color these started out as, if they started out as gray or if they
it was a gray, I can tell you that.
Okay, so if it's a gray, to try and find a paint that would actually match that gray color, and use a little bit of a gray acrylic paint that we can get to match, and then sponge it over top, like carefully in places, as long as you can get it to like as close to the match you can, over top of some of that lettering, and that gives the illusion of the weathering starting to flake and peel away.
Right.
Probably that I would do that before any sort of fading, because that way it's easiest to match what is going to be a uniform color all the way across. Whereas if I were to do, if I did my usual fading method, that would actually change the tone across the model. So that'd be the one of the first things that I would do, because you just, like, for example, the O just above the large N, and that large N itself is starting to fade away a little bit, or has been kind of chipped away, and just showing that by in essence chipping back some of the writing and printing can give that kind of look. I'd say it's a fairly uniform rust color. The only type of color that I see a little that's a little different is on the far ends, and then there's a little tougher ones, like right on the actual facing on the actual end of the car. It almost looks more like a kind of a primer, where things have been kind of worn away, less from water running over it, and perhaps from wear and tear of crews working the top. It is a little harder to see the walkways themselves. The hatches on the top, there wouldn't be a lot of chipping there, but the hinges and the bars across, those are rusted out. I would definitely be,
for sure,
be painting those, brush painting those. And I mean, that rust across the top, I probably established the initial pattern using sponge, like rust colored sponge, maybe layered a little bit. There's a couple places where it would kind of come down the wall a little bit. But as you're prone to say, Ralph, and this is very good, less is more.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it definitely needs a grunge pin wash, which I would do. Probably I would do that pin wash just after probably just after the fade, but maybe before the rust. Although I don't know. Actually, no. I think I would do the pin wash after the rust.
Yep.
And then of course the hatches across the bottom, I would definitely do sponge chipping down there. Looks more like kind of a chipping color. There's a lot more grunge down there. And those trucks are pretty rusty too. So that would be something that
Trucks are always rusty.
yeah. Well, I mean, those are the and I'm looking to see how much chipping there is actually on the. There's a little bit of chipping on some of the on the ladders. That brake wheel looks almost completely oxidized. It's kind of I can't tell, but I just looking at that. So anyway, that's kind of my first take on that one. But the signature one is just that line of rust across the top, and then just getting the streaks and chipping back the and chipping back the logos. I mean, my usual for doing something like this is the fading that I would do after I chip back the logo would be probably an oil dot fade, using whites, grays, Starship filth, and maybe a little bit of a rust color as well. So that's kind of my hot take on this one.
My turn.
Go for it.
Okay. My take on this car, the first thing I would do is try and I have these fiberglass brushes that I got from Micromark. I have the fat one, I have the skinny one. And since this has a lot of skinny lettering, I would use the skinny brush just to tone down the black a bit, take a little bit of it away, because it's all pad printed. The next thing I would do is my 10% paint wash. 10% paint, 90% alcohol, Tamiya paint. Spray it on. It also tones down the lettering. You have on the top left there, you have the N&W logo. You could leave that as it is, but I would touch it up with the brush. This is my take.
Mm-hmm.
Once I've got that done, the fade done, I would come back with a sponge with acrylic paint and just hit the top corner of that car with the rusty paint.
Yep.
And then I would come back with a brush later with a similar color and streak it down, whether it's oil, gouache, or even acrylic. Just streak it down a little bit.
Yeah.
The rest of the car, you have the top right-hand corner where you see that big rusty spot coming down that panel, the angled panel, basically with a sponge. The grime, I mean, you could even go through, if anybody's followed my videos on how to apply grime to your car, that would be the step after doing the fade before you do the rust. Just to add grime to the car, and what it does is it gives an uneven finish on the surface throughout, as they say, mottled finish. And the bottom is done. I usually do that with a sponge and a brush. The what do you call them? The vents at the bottom where you let the grain out. But on top where the hatches are, the hatch hardware basically is metal. And usually on these cars, the hatches are fiberglass. So you're not going to get a lot of weathering or rust on the hatch itself, except for what comes off of the hardware that holds it in place. Again, we talked about the welded seam. That's where that rust is starting from, because we've looked at this picture, we can't see anything on the roof that even indicates that it's coming from somewhere else. But that's about it for me. That's what I see on that car. The trucks, I always start my trucks with Rust-Oleum Camo Brown or Rust-Oleum Satin Brown. Either one. One's just a touch darker than the other. That really doesn't matter. And then I start using gouaches. I'll start off with a burnt umber over top of the Rust-Oleum. Oh, before that, I put a dull coat on the Rust-Oleum just to seal it, because sometimes, depending on which one it is, it sometimes remains sticky. So if you put the dull coat on, it gets rid of that. Then come back with a sponge and the gouaches and just dab on the burnt umber first, and then come back with some raw umber and just put it randomly so that you have the burnt umber and the raw umber showing through. And if you have to go back and add some more burnt umber, fine. And then as far as the bearing journals, I usually add a little bit of black enamel thinned out so that it looks like oil's been leaking out of the journal box.
Mhm.
And that's about it. And when you, the end plates, the angled end plates, I have a toothbrush that had 5 rows of bristles, and I cut out 4 rows. So I have a single row of bristles.
Okay.
And I use that, I'll dip it into my rust color, and I'll use that to spatter it on that end sheet in line with the wheels.
Okay.
Because the car in front is going to be kicking up whatever, and that's where it's going to end up on that angled sheet there.
Yeah.
So that's what I got. That's what I would do.
All right. So before we move on to the next picture, any questions around from everyone about that particular one? And I mean, I think a good start that here's an example of just you've heard two different ways to do it. The one thing I neglected to mention myself, of course, is using oils for the various.
Well, if you're gonna have streaks or pit marks, then oils are the way to go.
Now, for those of you out there who haven't really started having a chance to work with oils, one of the things that the Ralph and I have come to really quite enjoy are some of the products from these dedicated weathering companies, particularly Ammo by Meg and AK Interactive, which are both based out of Spain, and the Abtalon oils, which are tubes that give you color specific. But if you're not quite there or don't have the net, like these aren't something you can kind of wander into a store. You would have to order them. But at the same time, the type that you would get, say, at a Michael's, would be you'd say like burnt umber and burnt sienna would be kind of a starter ones, or the just you mentioned a few of those.
I've been doing this long enough that I've finally migrated to Winsor Newton products. I've tried pretty much all of them, Grumbacher, all those other oil products, gouaches as well. I've gone to Kmart and I bought the gouache packet. They're not as intense a color saturation as you would get from Winsor Newton. And I'm talking basically the gouaches there. As far as the oils go, if you a Winsor Newton tube of oil is probably going to cost you about $12. I'm not exactly sure what it is in US. That's what it is for me here in Canada.
Yeah, ditto.
The thing about the Winsor Newton product is that it's a finer grind of pigment that's in the oil paints than you would get in a Grumbacher type of oil paint. And if you were to take the same amount of oil paint and put them into 2 different pots and thin them out with mineral spirits, the Grumbacher you would see come out, and you'd see the grain as it dissolves.
Mm-hmm.
Winsor Newton makes a nice clear wash or a filter.
Mm-hmm.
And even better than a Winsor Newton are the Abtalon,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of places don't carry because it's basically new to the hobby now. It's the military guys use them a lot. I have a whole slew of them.
So do I.
And John does as well.
Mm-hmm.
You do your weathering. There's so many different methods of doing weathering. You can do an oil dot method. You can do adding a line of product and streaking it down. But if you do the dot, you're blending colors as you bring it down. And that's the beauty of the dot method. You're blending it.
Yeah.
So, who was it? Azek. How do you control and make a lighter rust? That's where you have, like I have, my 4 colors that I use are burnt umber, raw umber, burnt sienna, raw sienna. The sienna colors are on the bright orange side. The umber colors are on the dark earthy tones. So you have to figure out which one's which one you want to do the job, because I mean, you can add other colors to it. You can make a whole you do it simple.
Mm-hmm.
Use the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. And I don't mean you're stupid. That's just a saying. A lot of people like to exaggerate and take things further than they need to. Like John said earlier, keep it simple. Less is more. These are all terms that you have to get familiar with. When you start using prototype photographs, the whole scenario changes. You're not working from your head anymore. If you're working from your head, I can guarantee 99% of the time you're going to overdo it. Work from a prototype photograph and use that as a guide. It doesn't have to be exact, but use it as a guide.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of which, Andy, if you can start to call up our next prototype photo, and the just one question as he's doing that just came up from Relatable is, do we prefer water-based oil or other? And the answer for me is yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yes, and yes.
Everything.
This is the one from John Arthur.
Okay, so this one is from thanks, Andy. So John Arthur's question.
He's brave. I have to say right off the bat, he's brave.
Yeah, I'm looking at that
because it's a red oxide boxcar.
Yeah.
That as a beginner, that I would stay away from. But if you want to try it, give it a go, man. Don't let me tell you what to do. I'm just here to help you or to guide you.
He also says he's thinking of doing a fade first, paying special attention to the ends, which are actually black, which I couldn't tell that from the image, and then patch it out and attempt a red shift. Looking at an orangey Starship filth might get the grab, something like that, or an orangey red of most of the car.
Okay, so if I was doing this, I would not be adding another color to it. Not as far as a red or a brown or whatever. I would be adding rust colors or grime. That's all. I wouldn't be adding oranges or whatever to brighten it up a bit. That's the wrong way to go. Yeah. This car here is a perfect candidate for weathering pencils.
Yes, I am looking at that. So by the way, you might hear a little bit of noise in the background. My son is in beside me, and he doesn't realize when he's making noises. So if you see me reaching out over every once in a while, it's to remind me. But yes, like Ralph, I would totally agree, particularly around the logo itself, because the weathering pencil would give you that kind of that kind of control, especially if you do a wet application in around there, just to start kind of blocking out the letters, because but the main thing is when you're dealing with a red oxide boxcar like this, you have to ask the question, what is the rust color?
There isn't rust.
Yeah.
It's grime.
Yeah, and like some of the
I see rust on the door itself. I don't see it on the car.
yeah, no, and I mean the paint is kind of like whatever the paint is
It's faded.
to fade and kind of worn away a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is definitely one, like you could actually do the whole car with weathering pencils with this one. The particularly the kind of control that you can get, and doing like especially some of the applications along the side, and then softening that with a very 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 lightly damped, you know, a sponge that is like it's walked past some moisture kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
Would be the way that the way that I would kind of soften that up.
The way I describe it to Andy usually is, if you take a blue shop cloth, and everybody knows the blue shop cloths.
Yes.
Your dampened sponge should not put a watermark on that shop cloth, but yet the sponge is damp.
Yes. So
now Randall Ellis has a question.
Okay. So as far as a BNSF, now Randall, can you specify in terms of like you're talking the current orange and black kind of scheme, or are you talking about like
the green and black? Which one?
Sorry, yeah. I'm assuming a more modern place, particularly with those lighter. With the lighter steel trucks.
Hello.
This was from Jacob Butler. I've got two from him, so this one and the next will be both from Jacob Butler.
That, to me, is a perfect car for weathering pencils.
Yeah.
Although you can do that. First off, I would do it with my fade again. Because that was a boxcar, a red oxide boxcar. I would fade it down so that it's sort of a grayish boxcar red, and then I would use a gray oil type paint where I can streak it down. And Big Ammo has, and I forget what the number is, but they have that wash that you can streak down like that.
Okay.
And again, the trucks, I tend to do all my trucks the same way. I do Rust-Oleum and gouaches on top of that. 2 tones of gouaches. And I also paint the face of the wheel.
Yeah. So
there's a good one. There's an absolute good one. This is something you don't normally see, and if you absolutely get the chance to stand on an overpass and take photographs of a train passing, take as many photographs of the car roofs as you can, because it's invaluable. Because a lot of these sites that have these rail pictures don't show you the roof. So the roofs are usually galvanized. And galvanizing, when it starts to rust, it turns white first. And then it goes into a transition stage where it gets mottled with rust, and then it goes completely rusty. And that is the completely rusty. The white that you see is the caulking between the panels to stop the water leaks. So it's like a silicone caulking that they've put between the panels.
So if anything, that's kind of the thing that they're doing, that because the weathering is happening and deterioration.
Well, actually, the way the car is built, it's built with the silicone caulking. The
Okay,
silicone
right,
caulking doesn't change. It's the rust or the oxidization of the galvanized panel that changes.
right, of course. Neat, because one question that often comes back to me is, oh, this is interesting. I actually have one of these cars in my collection at home.
This one's from Robert Holloman's car.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting on the rust streaking is that there's almost a gap between the streaks that are coming down.
And that's interesting. I saw that too.
Yeah.
It's almost a perfect line.
Yeah.
Right across the car.
And I don't know if that's a case of this, like it's been rusted and it's gone through some dry areas where there's been kind of like sand in the area, and that's kind of almost sandblasted it off the highest raise point as it's going by. And that's, honestly, I'm pulling that out of the air. So that's
okay. So here's my take on that. When the car was painted, it was painted in 2 stages.
Right.
The guy was on a scaffold and painted the first half, the upper half.
Oh, yeah.
And when he painted the bottom half, he overlapped the upper half, and that's why you have less.
I see it. So there's extra paint protection there.
Yep.
Okay, so it's that.
So this kind of rust is not just streaking rust. That's rust that's coming from underneath the paint, coming through.
Yeah.
And that I would do with a sponge.
Right. So so you do a sponge layer first, and then you would do the kind of streaks over top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course the that blue fade, because you can also see it there where there's not as much of the rust that's actually on where those those blue
streaks are.
Those blue streaks, and now they're faded. And they're faded by quite a bit.
But it's extra paint.
But it's that extra layers of paint that's protecting the metal from underneath. So, and probably in terms of the sponge, probably like you get different densities of sponge. This one would be, this is like a makeup high density sponge. I would guess.
Well, it depends on, and I usually do it with my makeup sponges. I blot it on something before I go to the car.
Yeah.
So if I have it loaded with paint, I'm going to get a higher concentration of paint when I put it on the car.
Yeah.
But if I blot it on, and I usually use an old ceramic tile.
Oh, okay.
That I blot it so that it's uniform on the sponge face.
Right.
And it takes some of that paint off. So when I put it on the car, there's less going on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the one thing is just as a reminder for anybody doing sponge painting is that with sponge painting, if you dip it in the sponge in the paint and go directly on the model, you are not going to like what you get. Do exactly as Ralph had said, like take the sponge and dab it off until it is almost dry. And then go and use it.
So with this car, it's a 2-stage process as far as the sponge goes. The sponge gives you the general rust coming through the paint, but then I would seal that with a semi-gloss acrylic and come back with some of the Megamo stuff.
Right.
And do the streaks.
And you would do the streaks with the sponge.
Yep. No. You can do it with a brush.
Okay.
Put it at the top and streak it down with mineral spirits. Yeah.
And the one thing is to do this one. The nice thing is if you're using the mineral spirits, that in that middle part, if you get a little too much there, you can
clean it up.
You can just either very, very lightly dampen a brush, probably like a deer head stippler or a deer foot. stippler brush or something like that, and just lightly kind of clean it away, let it dry a little bit, and then you can pull whatever remaining pigment on the edges down to kind of fit there. So the grime is on too thick. How now, Robert? The one question is I guess the question is it acrylic or is it oils? Because if it's oils, it's easier.
Yeah, you got to be careful. If you use acrylics, you have very, very short working time. Especially if you're putting it on light like that.
Actually, you know what I also found, Ralph, is that I was afraid of using oils for a long time, and then once I started using them, kind of like, boy, those things are they are really quite forgiving. Okay, so Robert has said that it's not been sealed yet, but it is acrylic, so I assume that it's probably dry, right?
We're going to give it that.
Yeah. So if you haven't sealed it, that's to your favor. But if it isn't, that is going to be a little tougher. Reconstituting a dried acrylic paint is challenging. Not totally impossible, but it is challenging.
Okay, he's asking about also the grime. He feels the grime is too thick.
Too thick, and he used acrylic.
But he may have followed my video on putting the grime on, which was water mixable oils, gouaches, and microsol. So you're going to have to scrub at that to reduce the amount that's there, especially if it's dry. Okay, so it's if it's an acrylic, if it's a gouache is can be reconstituted just with water. Yeah, but by itself, yes. Yes. But it's mixed with the water mixable oils, right, and dissolved with microsol. All right, so no, he just put that. Yes, he did actually follow your method. So ignore me, follow Ralph. Yeah, so you're gonna have to scrub at it or accept it as it is and add some white to that grime so that you can reduce it. Yeah, because like for example, I've done some things where sometimes the weathering has just been a little too heavy, and sometimes like if it's an oil, yeah, you can remove it, but if it's an acrylic, it's like you have to either come up with other methods, either use something else kind of over it, or just try and work with what you have to kind of take it in a different direction. As what Bob Ross called them, happy accidents. If you can turn it into a happy accident. Oh yeah, that's my dull coat and the white streaks. That's a happy accident. Yes. But that at the time was not a happy accident. No, I would imagine not. We're getting a lot of cover hoppers here. I'm just theme.
I have quite a few on my list of what's to recommend too. This one's from Mr. C.A. Fane. Okay. Easiest things to work on is it's like a billboard.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, why do you think graffiti artists often target those? I mean, those and auto racks are their favorites. But so one of the things that I'm looking is that like I can barely make out the logo on the side of that. But that's a case of the I would probably I would Ralph, I would say like your grime method would certainly be a very good starting point for this one. That's where I was going to go. Yeah, and it just gives a general grime all over the car, and then you come back with the darker streaks. What would you do about the logo? Well, I can't see the logo, so I when you're doing the grime, you can add a little bit of white to the grime to bleach out the logo, or use the fiberglass brush, or there's so many different things that you can do.
the thing is you want it to be just barely legible.
Right. And I mean there
I see it.
yeah, I mean there can be some ways to do this. I may need to mute. My son just went into the washroom, so there may be an embarrassing noise shortly. So hang on for a second.
Oh, that yellow car was nice too.
I saw that. Yeah, that
That one.
All right, so that one started life in as wood. Well, I mean, it is
Bright
like,
yellow. Looks like an old reefer.
yeah, but I'm assuming that's a wood car.
Yeah.
So of course there, of course, because the wood, the paint flakes off of it differently. If there's any rust to be had, it starts at whatever the metal points on it are, and might drip down the wood. Although I don't see a lot. There's rust in and around the hinges.
Mm-hmm. It's just general grime, I think.
Yeah,
and it's streaking down because the boards are vertical.
Yep. Yep.
There's a little bit of patching at the bottom left-hand corner there over the wheel.
I see that. So adding a patch, just masking that off and spraying a little bit of the original color back over it. I mean the other like I'm also seeing a bit of I mean similarly the wear and tear on the logo itself, chipping back to the original color. But would you employ like, because there's wood underneath it? Of course, it's kind of this kind of gray chipping as well. I mean, the thing is, this one is very much out of my era. And if I'm doing old buildings like that, I'm usually starting from scratch. And when you're starting from scratch, that's where something like the hairspray method could work. But if you're starting with this,
you can't use hairspray on this. You can't use salt on this.
No,
because you're starting off with a car that already has a painted surface.
Yeah, and you can't use
all the decals, decals, whatever you want to call them, are already on there. And if you start playing around with salt it's just not right.
No. So for those of you listening, the hairspray method or the salt method, which are subtractive types, those really only work when you're starting from an undecorated model.
Exactly.
And so, for example, what I'm doing with my test of the solution box is using effectively the unofficially created. It's a version of the hairspray technique. But I'm starting with an undecorated model. I'm not doing something like that. But whereas something like this, again, I'm also seeing. I think like your grime method would work really well in this because of all the slats. It would.
The grime method. If you use the grime method, you'd have to use a brush to streak it down because. With this using a sponge, you're not getting the board by board.
Yeah.
If you streak it down, you get the board by board.
Yes. Okay. Right. Of course. And would you come back and use some oil, do oils as well on something like this?
I might use a gray oil.
Mm-hmm.
And just put a little bit at the top and streak it down. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go overboard.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see the roof on this one, as to what it would look like. Because if it's large, like, I mean, there's clearly metal on it, but I would presume that there's a fair bit of wood on the top of the car as well.
Actually, the only wood on the top of that car is underneath a layer of either lead or tar paper.
Okay.
The only wood on top of that is the walkway.
Okay.
So there's a question for you too, to move on. Weathering pencils from earlier.
Well, specifically the weathering pencils are AK Interactive
Exactly.
because they're designed for that. I mean,
Those are the ones we're referring to as the
yeah.
AK Interactive pencils.
Yeah, I mean, I have used watercolor pencils before, but they really, even though like that's the closest analogy for them, specifically the weathering pencils from AK Interactive come in all the colors that you need. And there's like Ralph has the full set of 37, and I've got 8 individual packs of 5, which means I have 3 duplicates. And so the AK Interactive weathering pencils would be good. So now this one is interesting, Ralph. I mean, like I can get at the graffiti in a second, but that like I'm looking at I'm not seeing. There's very little streaking, but what I'm seeing is that the paint is just. It's almost like it's been sandblasted off over time.
It's fading off.
Yeah. But really substantially, because of course this is another one of those really difficult cars to fade, unless
well, it's because it's ribs.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the ribs there, you wouldn't have the problem.
Well, actually, here's a question, Ralph, and this is a chicken and egg thing.
Okay.
Did it actually start as a white or a very light cream car? Or did it start as a red? Did it start as red and it's going down to the white primer? And I'm beginning to think like all of a sudden, it's like you look at those optical illusions where you see one thing and then suddenly you see something else.
Okay, so what do you think it is?
Initially, I thought it was red fading out. Now I'm beginning to think it's actually white rusting out.
I think it's red fading out.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, it depends on the location that the car comes from. If it's in the deep south or on the east coast south, the west coast south, it's going to get an awful lot of sun beating down on it. So
right.
Depending on when it was painted, you've all seen the Santa Fe locomotives where the war bonnet, the red war bonnet, has actually got a white film on it. That white film is the sun attacking the clear coat that's on top of the red, and it turns it white. So this could be a similar type of thing. Not that they use clear coat on this, but the UV in the sun would bleach that color right out, along with rain and all that kind of stuff, because every time you get water on it, it's like a magnifying glass as it drips down. Okay. That's my take.
Yeah, I think for me the clue that you've to support this is the writing on the door, and I mean the writing on the underneath the graffiti itself. So, and by the way, if you're ever thinking of doing if you're doing graffiti, ironically, graffiti is usually applied with spray paint. With graffiti, almost always, if you're painting it by hand.
And you're going to see brush strokes, so be careful.
Be careful. You got to make sure the paint is thin, to try and mitigate whatever kind of brush strokes that you're doing. If it's thick at all, that you will absolutely see brush strokes on it. So, all right. Oh, I love these green cars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like particularly just beside the patches on the left hand side, there's this kind of mottled unevenness right in there. I mean, yeah, like this is very much a like I would definitely use an oil dot fade on this as an early step to get that in. But I mean, the chipping of the rust on the white logo, and especially on that like heavy dark rust on the door. And of course, the door is that like tan cream color, which is also
same on the logo, same color on the logo.
Yeah. Now, Ralph, would you say that this would be a good example of a car that if someone is just starting out with weathering, they would actually that this would be a good one, a good color to start with?
Ooh.
Or
it could be. This could turn out beautifully, or it could go drastically wrong for a beginner.
Yeah. But sponge chipping on the door and on the logo. There's also the tiny little there's also tiny little rust flecks. Ralph, have you ever done like you've done your toothbrush splatter on either end? Have you ever done that to put just kind of random rust spots on the side?
I do it with a toothpick.
Okay.
I dip it in my acrylic paint, which is the closest color that I want to the rust color, and I put it on with the toothpick.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to try the brass toothpick that came with the solution box, but that can get a nice fine point. The wood toothpicks that I have, when I was using it a little bit, it's kind of like, oh, the dots are getting a little too big. I got to change toothpicks.
So we talked about the fade, and doing graffiti earlier.
Yeah, we did.
Just let me find it now. Where the hell did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, that's N scale. So what I did is I faded the whole half of the car with the white fade.
Yep.
I overdid it where I wanted the bat. The bat is done with a Sharpie.
Okay.
And then I came back with a Q-tip dipped in alcohol to take some of the fade away and make it like rays of the sun.
Yeah. That's an Atlas N scale car, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Still nice, very nice, very nicely done. So. And
that's the other part of it. That's the other side of it.
Okay.
Again, N scale. I'm not I don't promote graffiti, but I figure if I'm going to do graffiti, I'm going to make it memorable and very identifiable. So those are my takes.
Yeah, very nicely done. Now, someone did actually ask about recommending good sort of prefab graffiti art, because of course the two major ways you can do it is either through a decal, or notice we're both Canadians, we say decal, and or to hand draw it. I mean, you get most prototypically accurate if you hand draw it, but you have to do it carefully. The other thing is that you mentioned Sharpies. Micron pens are something that I've used that are very good for that. But it's this kind of building things up.
I don't know whether you see that. These are my regular Sharpies. These are regular point. Then I also have the ones that have the fine point, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I have the combination of.
Yeah. The black Micron pens have some of those are like 0.005.
Yep.
Is their fine. It's really good for fine work, and it's just it's a pen. Now there was this.
Oh, I love that car.
Oh, okay, go for it, Ralph.
I always start off with my general fade.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a go-to. It has to be.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, I would do a start off with a dot fade like this, but there's so much spillage on this. I mean, like
It's not even spillage. It's just the panels that have corroded in a different way.
Yeah. And how the ribs, the ribs themselves are standing out as quite rusted, and the panels themselves have all that streaking.
They look like they're quite rusted only because all the grime and so on is tucked right into the crevices or the sides of it.
Yeah.
And that's why it makes it stand out more.
Yeah. Like there's a lot of contrast with that. I mean, this one has so much on the sides that you can barely make out the road like the road name or number. I mean, I'm assuming that's Southern.
Yeah, it's a Southern car.
It is a Southern.
Like the Norfolk and Western one that you guys talked about first, it's the same type of car, but
same type of car.
Odd rainbow of earth tones coloration. I thought it was somewhat unique. So
yeah. I mean, this one, like I see a lot of myself. I would use a lot of oils to do something like this.
Just to pause for a second on that one question about the prefab graffiti. There are a whole bunch of graffiti decals out there, but for this contest, the graffiti decals are not allowed.
Yes. So if you're doing that, if you're doing graffiti, it must be hand painted for this contest. So the decals that you can use are basically if you're patching and you're putting new road numbers and things like that on, fine. But for graffiti, you need to do hand painted. But for your own stuff at home, I mean, there's a number of different companies out there. Part of it is just like there's the art of applying the decals over a textured surface. Like on a car like this, for example, applying a decal over top of this is difficult because you've just got a whole bunch of those raised ribs. And but if you're determined to do it, microsol like decal solvents are your friend. And you might have to do several laps with it. And then when you're done, come back with a paintbrush and kind of touch up any places where it might have fragmented a bit.
And with a number 11 blade to break into any bubbles that are there, and then do your microsol on top of that again.
Yeah. It's exactly what Ralph said, that process of when the decal is first applied, there are going to be bubbles underneath it. Pricking it with that number 11 blade, applying some more microsol, and rinse, repeat until it lies flat. In fact, I did a grain elevator that I did a grain elevator where I actually made my own decals to apply to that. And one of them I actually but they were the tester's clear decal paper, which is really thick. And I mean, it was like 10 to 20 layers of microsol before it was laying properly flat. Before I was happy with it. So
and then of course it has to, when you put the decals on, you put them on a semi-gloss or a gloss finish.
Yeah. Because
if you put it on a flat finish, you'll get what they call silvering. And there's no coming back from that.
Nope. No, that's not even putting gloss over top of that, because what that is just micro air bubbles underneath.
Yeah.
And so it dooms that process. Now, Jake, that's interesting. Sorry, I see one question. I'm just going to pull one up. Yeah, there we are, Jacob. Best cars to weather for a beginner.
That type of car that's on the screen now. Not necessarily that finish, but that type of car.
Yeah.
It's a nice flat surface. You can get your streaking rust if you want streaking rust, or whatever your prototype photo shows. I wouldn't use this prototype photo as my guide as a beginner.
No, this one's a little more complicated.
A lot more complicated. But yeah, something that has, if you're doing a box car, even this car is good because it's a brighter color. So whatever weathering you put on it, even if it's a light coat of weathering, it's going to show.
Mhm.
A boxcar in lighter colors, a tank car, this type of car, grain cars, all in the lighter colors. And that way, when you do your weathering, it stands out more.
And you
So-
can actually see what you've done.
Yep.
Because when you're doing, say, something like a red oxide boxcar, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see what you've done. Whereas on a lighter color, you can see almost immediately what you've done. So I'm looking at a few of these.
This is absolutely astonishing. This one
Yeah.
here looks like it's ready to go for the scrap heap.
Yeah. And I mean, it's been patched at least twice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's Conrail. That's a Conrail road number. But someone who knows rolling stock of the Eastern Seaboard better than I do would recognize the shape of the logo on the right. And
New York Central. Yeah, it was New York Central. It may have been patched into Penn Central. Probably was at some time, and then Conrail, and then it probably died before it made it to Norfolk Southern CSX. But it's got a long life, obviously.
Yeah. Well, here's actually a very long life, because the other thing that you notice is, of course, the ladder goes all the way up to the top, and you can see where there was a walkway across the top. Just for its age, this one has there's a real story behind this one.
Try and dig it out.
Oh yeah, and that's just it, is to do exactly that, of trying to dig that out, because there's doing the first layers of some of the weathering that's on it. There's the patching, like taking time to actually patch out those logos. There's been at least one patch underneath that. In addition to that, there's at least one patch underneath that Conrail one.
Yep.
And then all that rusting over top of it. This one is really layered.
So here's a good one for you, JC.
Okay, so you're bringing some up. So
okay, so if you had a flat car,
mm-hmm.
Flat car, there's not a lot of detail to it.
No.
How would you weather it and make it convincing?
Well, depends on like a lot of flat cars have like a wood top on it.
Some have a steel deck.
Some like part of that is determining what the actual like when weathering it isn't just on the side, because there's so little space to work with on the side. So a lot of the emphasis would actually be trying to come up with something that's convincing on the deck. I mean, there's been a couple of times, like for example, if it's a wood deck, I would actually paint, almost completely repaint the wood deck itself.
The wood? I would score it all to hell, like it's been worn before I paint it.
Yeah, well, like I was thinking, like I'm always starting an N scale, which actually that fiberglass brush of yours would do well for scoring that kind of thing. But yeah, like I mean, you can roughen up the surface. Sometimes you can kind of create that illusion with a bit of paint, but vary the color of the wood boards. Probably a pin wash. Again, this is assuming wood. Make it look like some planks have been perhaps replaced, and generally in grays mostly.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you and take you back. A lot of guys that are starting don't know what a pin wash is.
Right.
They don't know what a filter is. These are all terms that have come up as a result of military modeling, and we're bringing it into the hobby here now. and the pin wash actually brings color, contrasting color into the crevice lines, whether it's a rib or a panel line. And filters, if you put a filter on, depending on the color, you actually change the base color by adding this filter. And a lot of times what it does is it unifies every other color that's on there. So these are some of the things to look at, to keep in mind when you're working. And usually they're done with oils.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why oils are so good is because they have particularly the thinners have a much, the surface tension is so much lower than water. So it can run right into those details, and it pulls the pigment into the corners and the crevices of the detail.
One of the things I've found with mineral spirits, depending on how you've finished the car or the layer that you've been working on, if you finish it in a matte or a flat surface, the mineral spirits will actually just spread right out.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a semi-gloss, it'll sort of stay where you put it. And a gloss, it'll just sit on top of the surface until you spread it out.
Yeah.
So those are also some things to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I use the semi-gloss and the matte finish back and forth. I use it universally on all my weathering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things with getting into weathering that quite often, certainly in my earlier painting career, like the idea is that the clear coat is what you use to seal it at the end of the job. Whereas now, if you're doing weathering, it actually becomes an intermediary step because it can help one, protect the layer that you've just done, and two, it actually provides the quality for whatever you're going to apply to it. So, for example, if you are doing a painting with acrylics, you are coming up to a step that you're doing, say, sponge chipping or brush painting specifically with acrylics, then a matte coat is what you want to aim for. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're doing say an enamel wash or something based with oils, satin or a gloss coat is what you want to work with there, because it takes advantage of the properties. The properties there. There are some exceptions. For example, a filter is usually done with an oil-based paint, but it is usually applied over a matte surface because you're not trying to get it to run into the cracks. You're just over this whole surface trying to change the color. So there are some exceptions. Now, way back, someone mentioned about how do you do, say, the trucks and the fuel tanks on a BNS locomotive?
Well, that was Randy Hemmel, I think.
Yeah, that I don't know.
He never came back with the local colors.
Yes. So I don't know if Andy, are you able to call up very quickly call up a BNSF locomotive if you can?
Sure.
Just go to railpictures.net, pull one out, and see what we get. So, now Nicholas Azak, 2005, just asked a question about how can you tell, looking at a car, if it is a steel-bedded flat car or a wood one?
The manufacturer usually molds the plastic to look like wood or just a flat surface. If it's a flat surface and it has rivets, it's steel.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully that it's just making sure. Take a close look at the surface, and if you see a bunch of slats, then it's wood, and just just start looking for rivets.
Like some of the things when you get into doing flat cars and other things like that, you sometimes have to take liberties and assume. Well, it's not assume. You have to understand what's happening to that car in the production, in the use of the car, and how it's treated. A lot of times you end up with, and I'm trying to find a photograph to show you. There. Now to get it to come up. Share screen. So this is a steel deck car.
Okay.
And I can blow it up.
There we go.
And what happens on a steel deck car a lot of times is the fact that they don't just fasten it down with chains. You notice there's no pockets along the side here to put chains into. What they end up doing is they weld the chain to the deck. So here's a bunch of weld marks that I simulated by using a piece of, it was a paper clip bent to about 1/8 of an inch, dipped in CA glue, and then touched to the deck of the flat car.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you that lump. But other times you have, oh, let's see, I'm not sure whether it's going to be here or not. No. There, that's another.
And that's actually showing the chains right there.
Yep, welded to the deck. It's the same car, but now it has a load on it.
Wonderful.
And a lot of times, and I didn't have it at the time, but a lot of times they have the chain jacks on them where they can really reef them down once they're welded to the deck.
Now,
So,
just as the modeling on that particular model, did you supply your own chain for that, or did it?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Actually, that load is where is it now? It's part of my kid's stapler. It was an electric stapler, battery powered. It worked about a half dozen times and then it stopped working.
Oh no.
So I took it apart and I'm thinking, can I? Yeah, this would make perfect loads. So that's what I did. Come on, there it is. There's the other part of it.
All right.
And that's a wood deck.
Yep. So, and you can see the slats right along that. Nicely done. So,
and while I was painting it, I used Bragdon or AIM powders or Monroe powders, whichever you want to call them. AIM and Monroe are now the same. AIM sold to Monroe, so they're now Monroe powders. But Bragdon are similar. So as I was painting the deck, I was just throwing some powder in and brushing it into the paint. And that's the way it turned out. It's just, like stains.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the main things to I'm one that doesn't tend to use pigments all that much, but for example, on the solution box, pigments are part and parcel of it, and I'm going to be using it there. That they really can do texture. Oh wow,
my favorite.
So that may have been dirtier than you intended, but I've got a couple, by the way. I just thought that one was too interesting to miss the opportunity to bring up. So.
Oh wow. Well,
now,
I'm assuming that hits something.
Oh sure. I've got some regular, that are more traditional running locomotives too.
Okay, so this paint scheme, whether it's the pumpkin orange and green top, or the pumpkin orange and the black, and usually the black is with the swoosh, and the green is with just the BNSF. Both have silver fuel tank and silver trucks, and they rust differently. So rather than paint them out as brown, I matte coat them, and I use gouaches on top of the silver,
Hmm.
like it's rust coming through.
Right.
And then there's the other one in the middle, the executive paint job.
Hmm.
That's a whole different kettle of fish as well.
Yeah, because I mean those are two very different ones. So whereas this is a bit cleaner. That's more dust. You can actually see the a little bit of a fuel run.
Yep. So with these models, you have, first of all, you have to think of, where am I trying to model? What part of the country am I trying to model on my layout? Because if that's where these weathered cars are going to go, then they should replicate what they did in real life. So if there's a lot of dust on them, then you can, after you've done your weathering, you come back with an airbrush with a buff color and just sort of overspray the wheels, the tanks, the lower part of the railings and so on, to give it the dusty look. And I would do it with an airbrush.
Hmm.
Some other parts of the country, you're running through red soil.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're in the Canadian Maritimes, for example.
Well, so you have a different color coming up on the trucks, and the dust that's created.
Mm-hmm. There was an interesting contrast that a lot of CSX locomotives, if they're in a high humidity, high moisture environment, there's a lot of rust and streaky rust on there. Whereas by comparison, Union Pacific that are operating in the arid Southwest, that's going to be a lot more in the way of sun fading with a similarly aged locomotive. Obviously, environment plays a huge role on where things are. So keep that
Absolutely.
in mind. Whether it's a locomotive or the rolling stock itself, where is it traveling through? Like, for example, Canadian prairies, lots and lots and lots of grain cars, and yet these grain cars are coated with graffiti. But generally, graffiti writers you won't find, out in the middle of nowhere in the Canadian prairies. You'll find some, because there are some.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they'll pick up that graffiti when they are at a port. And so that's also what's the route that they're traveling to.
So Randall Ellis has a question here. He's put that up, and in the meantime, I will also share, because it's Burlington Northern.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this one will do.
Okay.
If it'll open up.
Okay. We also have a question from Edward Cady that I'll bring up.
So he says he alters the color of the fuel tank in the trucks, and yes, absolutely. The best way to alter the color is to dull coat them. It's not silver anymore; it becomes a gray. And then if you add a little bit of grime to them, or even the whitewash,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a lighter gray. And then you add your dirt and your rust and your grime.
Mm-hmm.
This particular car or locomotive, it had a dent in the fuel tank, which I could not simulate the dent, so I had to paint it to look like a dent.
Yeah.
But we get into this. Here's two different colors on the car, the orange and the green.
Mm-hmm.
This was a dark green, almost black.
Yeah.
And this was a bright orange. So going back to the color wheel again, well, there's the orange that it was. So you go back to the color wheel. When you're doing the orange, you're adding green to the fade. When you're doing the green, you're adding red to the fade. And it just blends the two together.
Mm-hmm. Nicely done. There we are. So here's the question of we of course emphasize finding prototype pictures, but of course that assumes color. And when you're doing the Reconstruction era, that's, you know, you will not find the like color pictures at all if you're lucky. I mean, most of them are in sepia tone.
That's right.
So at that point in time, some of it is doing some historical research on places that actually have done some work to do some restorations. They've kind of done their kind of idea. But the other thing is, the further back in history you go, the less choices of colors people had. And like when someone was a professional painter, they couldn't go to a store and say, okay, I'll take a gallon of, you know, of this color. Some of them had to genuinely mix their own paints. Mm-hmm. And so one of the reasons why red oxide boxcars were a common color is because, oddly enough, you could actually make red oxide fairly easily. Yes, sorry. For those of you who weren't aware, the Reconstruction period is the period following the American Civil War from 1865 onward. And
as far as colors go, it's your best guess.
Yeah, and honestly, the one thing is, look at current prototypes to kind of give you an idea and a guideline, particularly if you can find color photographs of steam locomotives, for example, because during like color photography in the era where it was starting to become available, is taking pictures of things that at least you can start to extrapolate from and move back. The other thing that you can do is look at kind of prototype pictures of certain things and say, okay, and sort of try to apply it backwards. So Dan's model railroading journey has another good one. Only tried chalks so far. Curiously enough, as someone who weathers a lot, I don't use chalks very often because I find them actually too difficult.
They're not difficult.
Yeah, but
they just don't work.
Mm-hmm.
Chalks are one thing, and then you have Bragdon powders, which are paint pigments, another thing.
Yeah,
and the only powders I use nowadays is to simulate the soot on the roof of a locomotive.
Right, and that gives you that kind of texture. So the suggestion actually, Dan, is that look at like there's sort of three major paint types that you'd be looking at: acrylics, oils, and gouaches.
Watercolor.
And those two watercolors. And of course Ralph has a very good starting point with doing some of that with Ian. So part of it is so Ralph, where would you like for someone who's just starting out? Initially, this is not where I first started out, but some of it is start picking up some books or resources, or frankly, you know, self-advertising. Watch videos from both Ralph and myself, because we've been doing this for a little while. You know, to like I actually, my very first video on my channel was, where do I start? And so you can check that out. I'm actually in process of rewriting that first episode because it desperately needs a good polish, because my equipment now is a lot better than it was. But don't be afraid of exploring different mediums. Look at different resources from all different kinds of genres. The solution box that I just checked out, for example, is a neat way of getting started. If it's for an absolute beginner, if you have a Michaels nearby and you want to try some oils, that could be a way to go. Anyway, Ralph,
you might also be able to get the gouaches at Michaels.
Yes, actually, you can.
My only caveat going to Michaels is, if they still have the coupon routine going, go online before you go shopping at Michael's and see if you can get, it's usually a 25, 30, 40% off, because if I go to an art store to buy the gouaches, I pay $6 a tube. If I go to Michael's, I pay $12 a tube.
Yeah.
So if you don't have an art supply store around, that's the best place to get the Winsor Newton products, or Michael's as a last resort. Dick Blick's is art supply. Hobby Lobby is hobbies. It's not an art supply store.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be shopping for that kind of stuff, you know, that's the places to go.
Yeah.
I would say try everything if you can afford it, and you'll end up finding something that you really like the way it turns out, and that's what you go with.
And following up on that, like realizing that we've been at this for almost two hours, so we should look at starting to wind down. But with regard to that, is that you will notice that Ralph's techniques and my techniques are different, and yet the results we work towards are comparable. Ralph's better than I am. Let's be honest, but it's these techniques that we find that work for us. We find the rhythms that work for us. I mean, I'm always wanting to try some new things, and I mean the other thing is to look at. If you want to look at some of the higher grade products, if you're lucky enough to be near a hobby store that actually carries things like AK Interactive or the Ammo by MIG material, they're definitely worth trying out. But they also have websites that you can go check out.
Right.
I definitely recommend them. I've been very, very pleased, because the truth is you can make your you can kind of mix your own, but also that is dependent upon the quality of the materials you're working with.
Exactly.
Whereas these products from these companies, they've spent a lot of time figuring it out for you. So, and you can get something that will replicate the results. It'll be consistent across the board. But yeah, I mean, our art supply stores are good, but also do check out the do check out places like primarily Ammo by MIG, AK Interactive are probably the two premier ones like that. But there are other companies out there. As you know, I mean, Vallejo is actually came before either AK or Ammo by MIG.
Well, actually, they make the MIG products and the ammo products.
So there you go. So, and it's all. The other thing is, the Spanish are amongst the best modelers in the world, and that's where some of the best products are coming out. So pay attention to what the Spaniards are doing.
Yeah, but they're mostly all military modelers.
That's true.
Or diorama builders.
Yeah.
They're not model railroaders.
Well,
don't be afraid to explore.
Yeah. I mean, I started out in science fiction modeling. There's my Millennium Falcon that's been sitting in the back.
We all have our different ways of doing things. The products that I use was a long journey to come up with the products that I finally settled on, only because I went along and discarded what didn't work for me. And I would explore new products. And if they worked fine, I kept them. So I have AK, I have MIG ammo, I have Tamiya paints. And Tamiya paints don't have a wide selection of color, but they have a lot of the earth tones that you need for weathering. So I use those, and I use them because I can mix them freely with alcohol, lacquer thinner, acetone, and I shoot them at 50-50 or 60-40 through my airbrush with no problems whatsoever. But what I end up with in my product line, I've had people come to me and say, why do you promote such expensive products? It's not that I'm promoting such expensive products. It's I've gotten rid of the cheap ones because they don't work. So this is what works best for me. If you can find something better for you, that's on you. I'm falling in love with these AK weathering pencils, which I thought I was going to have trouble with. But hey.
Yeah. And I was quite pleased. I mean, it's one of the few times where I've actually had a company say, "Here, try these out and review them." And actually, I think it's the only sort of sponsored kind of thing that I've had before or since.
I wish.
And I honestly lucked out, but they are genuinely good products, and they are a genuinely new one that I would encourage people try these out, because they're extremely versatile as well, and actually much more forgiving than I thought they would be.
So many different ways to use them.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And Heath of Human City Junction, he wanted to see me do more with the weathering pencils. Maybe we will do so. I will do something in the next little get together. But don't be afraid. If you want to sample it, go out and get the first pack. What is it called? Rust?
Yeah, there's a rust set, and I think there's a
chipping set.
Chipping set.
So the rust set is the one to start with.
Yeah.
And just experiment. It's only 5 pencils. It's only going to cost you at maximum $10. And I think each one sells for just a little over $1 or just under $1 if you buy them separately. But not everybody carries them, so you have to be careful.
Yeah, and you do have to. Part of it's just finding where you can get them, because of course, if you're ordering them, for example, directly from Ammo by Mig, in that case, AK Interactive. If you're ordering them from Spain and they don't have a local distribution, it's coming across the water. It'll take a while to get there, and you may be paying a bit of a premium for the shipping.
Yep.
But is it worth it? Yes.
Absolutely. In my opinion, and John's, and we both are having a ball with these things.
And I mean, the other thing is also, again, for beginners, is just immerse yourself in, read as much as you can. There are and as many genres as you can. Like, learn what the aircraft modelers are doing. Look at what. I mean, Ralph and I both have side projects from outside of model railroading that we're looking at. I mean, I've got the as I said, I've got the Falcon there, but I also have figures for Dungeons and Dragons or things.
Yeah, I've done that too.
Yep, and all different kinds of miniatures. There's a wide variety. Just the big thing is, if I do nothing else in this hobby, there we go. Yep, to get out of our silo. So don't just look at what model railroaders are doing.
The best advice I can give is step outside of your comfort zone.
Yep. Well,
I don't care how you do it or what you do. Step outside your comfort zone and experiment.
And that's how I got started with oils, and it changed the way I paint. Absolutely. Yeah, and so I exactly what Ralph said. So I'm realizing we are coming up almost exactly on 2 hours, and I guess I hope we've covered the bases well for tonight. We are going to do this again. So if you're interested, I'm not quite sure when we'll schedule the next one, but it'll be probably in a 2 to 3 weeks. Just kind of keep an eye on that, because I have to arrange the time with Ralph and with Andy, who's been our director producer behind the scenes. But if you have something that is that you really want to see how we might weather it, and actually, here's another process. Say, for example, you've got a picture of not a prototype, but a car, like a scale, like a piece of rolling stock, a locomotive that you've got at home, and you're wondering how would we weather this? What would be the process of doing that? And you could maybe send that to Andy, and Ralph and I would take you through the process of what we would do, starting with that. So there's Andy's email address, and start sending those out. And again, of course, for those of you who are watching this on replay, we'll get a chance to do this again. But again, for everything, Ralph, is there anything else you wanted to add before we do a
no? I'm usually nightly on Model Railroading Live, whereby.com, where Model Railroading Live. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do it through my Facebook page. Send me a message. I also have my weathering page, which is Weathering a Touch of Yesterday. So you can send me messages in both places.
Yeah.
Or send it to Andy, and I will get it. And
similarly to me, my email address, we posted this earlier, jcsriptrack at gmail.com. And of course, you're probably, whether you're watching this on Model Railroading Live or on my channel, so you can send me messages there. The other thing is that we have I have my own Facebook page and a Facebook group, but there's also the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest group, of course, because we're doing this in support of the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest #3, and there is a Facebook group there. Just do a search for it. However, it is a private group. You have to ask to join. But I am one of the administrators. Ron Marsh, who originally created that, had a chance to do that. Actually, you know what? Should we try and ask Ron to have because like Ron has more or less passed the torch to Ralph, myself, and the others. But it might be kind of fun to actually have Ron in on a conversation. Can't promise. I'm just going to ask. But that it might be kind of fun to have him in on one of those on a future live stream. But again, thank you very much. And so any other questions that you have, please forward them either to myself, to Andy. If you're doing kind of the pictures, because of the way we like to format this, of being surprised with what the pictures are, send those to Andy. And with that, if you're thinking about entering the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest, what do you have to lose? Because one of the things that, yes, to calculate it, Snipe, is patching okay? The answer is yes. Because if you're doing a patch, some people who don't like doing graffiti, if you do a patch, that means you're not
painted it out.
You painted it out. So, but patches are definitely allowed. In fact, I encourage them because they actually add a lot of flavor. And not only that, if you're not good at graffiti, it's a good way to have graffiti on your car. So yes, absolutely. I'm definitely good for that. So anyway, thank you for everyone. We'll try and give you a little bit more notice as to the next time that Ralph and I are getting together. This one was kind of last minute. That was depending on schedules. Mostly my kids are just finishing school, and so there was a lot of variables and a lot of unknowns. But that we had the opportunity. I'm very grateful to Ralph. I'm very grateful for Andy, because Model Railroading Live is the one who actually provided the infrastructure through StreamYard on doing this. A thank you to Midwest Model Railroad for being the sponsors to the contest. A thank you also to Ron Marsh for getting this whole thing started. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the original Down and Dirty Weathering Contest. And the opportunities that I've had a chance to meet people in the community, including my illustrious co-host, the Mudfather. It's been a pleasure getting to know you through this whole process.
Ditto, brother.
Yeah. Anyway, and kind of nice to have a couple Canadians talk about weathering, because we talk about the weather all the time anyway, because it's a Canadian thing to do. But
well, like you're sweltering in heat right now, and
yes,
and
the
we're gonna have rain all day tomorrow. So
39 degrees Celsius, and for that, like, keep in mind this is Canada.
yeah,
West coast of Canada, and the west coast of Canada doesn't get all that cold, but we don't get all that hot. And so 39 degrees Celsius is somewhere north of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about
104.
104, 105. Anyway, it's hot.
And it's going to get hotter.
Yep. So anyway, oh boy.
All right.
Thank you to everyone, and Andy, we can wrap this up. So I guess my usual sign off is good luck, and may you keep on track.
And stay safe, guys.